Henry Ford did not invent the automobile. He did not invent the engine. He did not invent industrial labor. What he redesigned was the role of the human being inside a system. By controlling production, he controlled time. By controlling time, he controlled labor. And by controlling labor, he reshaped behavior itself. This is not the story of a car company. It is the story of a system that changed how people live, work, and think. This is the story of Henry Ford. Born in 1863, died in 1947. Early life, the rejection of the farm. Henry Ford was born on July 30th, 1863, on a farm near Dearborn, Michigan. His parents, William and Mary Ford, were immigrants of Irish origin who had done what millions of others had done before them, carved a life out of American soil through agriculture. The farm was not just a place of work, it was an identity, a future, a destiny. But Henry Ford hated it. He disliked the unpredictability of nature, the long hours, and the dependence on seasons. He was fascinated instead by machines, anything with gears, levers, or moving parts. As a child, he disassembled watches just to understand how time itself was measured. While other boys learned to plow fields, Ford learned to repair mechanical systems. At 16, he made a decision that quietly set him against the path his family had chosen. He left the farm and moved to Detroit, where he worked as a machinist's apprentice. Detroit at the time was transforming from a regional hub into an industrial center. It was noisy, dangerous, and filled with opportunity. Ford wasn't wealthy, he wasn't well connected, but he was obsessed with one idea: that machines could be made predictable, efficient, and controllable in a way human labor never was. This obsession would define everything that followed. Early failures, learning what really mattered. In the 1890s, Henry Ford began building experimental engines in his spare time. He was not alone. America was flooded with inventors attempting to harness internal combustion. Many failed. Some succeeded briefly. Few endured. Ford's early ventures were unstable. The Detroit Automobile Company collapsed due to poor quality and internal disagreements. Investors grew impatient. Ford was talented but erratic. He focused too much on experimentation and too little on discipline. From the outside, these failures looked like proof that Ford wasn't ready, but internally, Ford was learning something far more important than engineering. He learned that the product didn't matter as much as the process, that innovation without control was chaos, that investors didn't want brilliance. They wanted predictability. Ford realized that if he wanted to succeed, he couldn't just build cars. He had to design a system that removed uncertainty at every level. The lesson was clear. Whoever controls the system controls the outcome. Ford Motor Company. Simplicity is strategy. In 1903, Henry Ford founded the Ford Motor Company. This time, he structured it differently. Power was centralized, decisions were streamlined, chaos was minimized. Then, in 1908, Ford introduced the Model T. The Model T was not the most elegant car. It was not the fastest. It was not customizable. And that was the point. One design, few variations, standardized parts. Ford rejected the idea that consumers needed endless choice. He believed choice slowed production. Standardization accelerated it. By limiting variation, Ford reduced costs, simplified repairs, and increased output. The Model T was affordable not because it was cheap, but because it was efficient. This was Ford's genius. He understood that scale was power, and scale required sameness. The automobile stopped being a luxury object and became a mass-produced tool. Transportation was no longer exclusive, it was systematic, and systems, once built, demand obedience. The assembly line, turning time into a weapon. In 1913, Henry Ford introduced the moving assembly line. This was not just a technical innovation, it was a philosophical one. Instead of workers moving to the product moved to the workers. Each person performed one task, over and over. Repetition replaced craftsmanship, speed replaced skill. Production times collapsed. What once took 12 hours now took 90 minutes. Costs plummeted, profits exploded. But something else happened. The worker became a component. Human motion was standardized. Time was measured down to seconds. Individual rhythm was replaced by mechanical pacing. The factory dictated not only what workers did, but how fast they did it. The assembly line did not just produce cars, it produced discipline. Ford had discovered that efficiency wasn't about working harder. It was about designing a system where deviation was impossible. Control of labor, the $5 day. In 1914, Ford introduced the $5 day, more than double the average industrial wage. To the public, it looked revolutionary. Ford was praised as a humanitarian. Workers flooded Detroit seeking jobs. Turnover dropped. Productivity increased. But the raise came with conditions. Ford created the Sociological Department, a private investigative unit that monitored workers' lives outside the factory. Inspectors checked homes, spending habits, alcohol use, and family behavior. Workers who failed to meet Ford's moral standards risked losing their pay. The message was clear. Higher wages were not freedom. They were leverage. Ford understood something fundamental. If you pay people enough to depend on you, you don't need chains. The system extended beyond the factory floor. It shaped housing, family life, consumption, and social behavior. Labor was no longer just something you sold. It was something Ford managed. Ideology and contradictions. Freedom versus control. Henry Ford spoke constantly about independence. He championed self-reliance. He despised bankers, unions, and government regulation. And yet his system demanded obedience. Ford violently opposed unions. He hired enforcers to intimidate organizers. He crushed dissent. Efficiency, in his worldview, required silence. He believed regulation slowed progress. That centralized authority, his authority, was more effective than democratic negotiation. Freedom, to Ford, meant freedom from inefficiency, not freedom for workers. This contradiction sits at the heart of his legacy. Ford believed systems could liberate humanity from toil. But the system he built replaced autonomy with precision, creativity with repetition, and community with hierarchy. The machine ran smoothly. The human adapted or broke. The system looked fair on the surface, but fairness was tightly managed. Workers earned more, but gave up control. Time no longer belonged to the individual. It belonged to the factory clock. Choices were reduced to efficiency. Creativity was seen as waste. Silence was rewarded more than ideas. Obedience was mistaken for stability. The factory promised order, but order came at a cost. Human needs were secondary to output. Personal freedom slowed the machine. Ford trusted systems more than people. He believed structure created progress, but structure also created pressure. Those who could not adapt were removed. The system did not ask permission, it simply moved forward. Death and legacy. The system survives. Henry Ford died on April 7, 1947, at the age of 83 in Dearborn, Michigan. By then, the world had changed. Factories across the globe adopted the assembly line. Governments organized labor around industrial output. Education systems trained students for repetition and punctuality. Cities were redesigned around automobiles. Ford did not just build a company, he built a template, a system where efficiency justified control, where scale justified conformity, where progress was measured in output, not well-being. The system outlived the man. Henry Ford believed efficiency would liberate humanity. Instead, it redefined it. The question is not whether the system worked. The question is who the system was built for, and whether we are still living inside it.